Day two gems are what we're talking about today, and how the Calvin Ridley deal affects who they get on day two. We'll talk about it here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you for joining me, Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. And we always thank you for making us your first listen. A quick reminder, we're free to subscribe to on our YouTube page. Make sure you tap into the YouTube page, hit the like button, subscribe, and then hit the bell so you receive notifications each and every time we drop an episode. Also, wherever you listen to audio podcasts, make sure you tap into that location every single day so that you don't miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150. If your bet wins, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And shout out to the everydayers for joining us every day. You can be an everydayer. All you got to do is say it. Join us every single day. All right, today we're going to talk about day two players I love. Believe it or not, day two is my favorite day of the NFL draft. And that's because there are a lot of players on day two that are real close to being day one players. And a lot of them may be more talented than people that are picked in day one. But as I always say, the draft is about prospect. And in the word prospect, you'll find a word that says likely. I always read this definition out when I talk about what prospects are and why teams make the picks that they make. So why not? I'll do it again. I'm going to define prospect in English. All right. The possibility or likelihood of some future event occurring. That's the first thing that pops up when you start talking about prospects. And that's how the NFL views the draft. It's about the likelihood, not like the likelihood that they'll be good tomorrow or year one. It's the likelihood that they'll have long-term success and the possibility. And it's based on a whole bunch of things. Body of work gives you evidence of it. What they project to do, what they're going to do when they have NFL coaching. So sometimes you see guys that are picked higher, and you even see this in high school recruiting where a dude will have a 5-star rating because of what they project his ceiling is going to be like, not basically what he is right now. A lot of dudes, they're 17 or 18. They're better than everybody else in high school because if you saw them when they were 8, they already had a mustache, right? But what happens is they hit their ceiling. And other guys kind of keep going. And then the dude that used to be the best when he was 13, he's not like that anymore when they're 28. In fact, he's the dude that always talking about what he used to do to everybody, but he can't do it now, right? So the word prospect, that's what that means. So a lot of times some people fall to day two because there's something missing, like they're not tall enough, the arms are a little bit short, or it's just a misread. And sometimes, those guys are overachievers as well because you thought that they were going to be day three guys, and then they're day two guys because they show up and they're better than you thought they were and may have played at lower competition. So what we're going to talk about is day two players I love for the Jaguars. We're going to focus on two players. It's Christian Haynes, center/guard, and that should tell you why I'm so high on him, because of his versatility. He's from UConn, who played at the Senior Bowl and did his thing. And then Dwayne Carter. Hey, Mr. Carter, the dude, by the way, that's Jay-Z and Lil Wayne's last name, right? So that's where I get that from. Hey, Mr. Carter. I think that was on the Carter 4. But in any event, the reason why I'm bringing those two guys up, because they would provide something very, very important that the Jaguars absolutely need. So we'll talk about both of those guys. Calvin Ridley deal. Why does the Calvin Ridley deal affect this? Because day two is round 2 and 3. And right now there's a little bit of confusion as to where what that deal meant. When the Jaguars traded last year for Calvin Ridley at the trade deadline, there was a conditional draft pick. It's going to void the Jaguars from having 2 selections. That's without compensatory picks, by the way, unless the Jaguars make a trade. Right now, they're either going to be missing their 3rd, which is the most likely scenario, or their 2nd. So I'll go through that because there's a lot of confusion about that deal. But I'm going to also tell you why I believe that this is a choice for the Jaguars and it's not necessarily something that, what do they call it? A no-brainer? Yeah, it is a brainer. You have to make the decision between what I call sunken cost and what it'll cost to keep something. So I'll explain that to you as best I can. But it has a profound effect on this year's draft because day 2, in my opinion, is where the gold is, right? That's where the gold is. One, you can get a real good player who should have been a day 1 guy. He'll give you day 1 production. It's going to get him at an exponentially cheaper price. That's why the Calvin Ridley deal also, there's an effect on why you do it and if you do it and when you do it. So we'll make sure we go through all of that and discuss it. But so many good players. And the Jaguars have so many needs, and most of those needs can be addressed in day 2 and some in day 3. Why is that so important? You might think it's not important for a GM that only has a track record of hitting on his first round picks. And I understand that if you're Jaguar fans, but I have constantly said that that's a whole different argument. That means that dude shouldn't be there. If he can't hit on the rest of these picks, you have no faith in your GM to hit on anything outside of the obvious, then that's a problem. But we're here. We're here, and we have to hope that this isn't a singular decision and that Trent Baalke at some point does hit on more of these picks. They did it in year 1. They didn't do it in year 2, and they haven't yet done it in year 3. Well, they didn't do it in year 3, even though those guys still have a chance. How can they be more efficient and hit on more picks late? Well, the first thing is to diagnose who can play and who can't. And we always talk about getting to where need meets talent on the draft board. If Dwayne Carter and Christian Haynes are both there in the second round at pick 48, I have my doubts. Now, if you look at these big boards, and I'm going to use one later on, I'm going to use the PFF big board to make a point about the Ridley compensation. They will be. Well, I think one of them will be. I think Christian Haynes is probably gone, but Dwayne Carter. If you ask NFL scouts, and if you ask, and I haven't asked them, but I'm saying if you will, I'm just so confident in what I think they'll say. I think both of these players are guys that are going to be immediate help and long-term help for the Jaguars. The reason why I think it's so important, one guy in Haynes is really, really versatile. Dwayne Carter, on the other hand, is just a big physical pass rushing, pass eating, and defensive lineman. You can pick a defensive lineman day 2 and have him not start because they rotate. It's not so much with the day 2 pick on the offensive line because they don't rotate unless it's injury. All right, for the most part. So a really good backup offensive lineman who has starter capability is a convenience. A backup defensive lineman with starting capability is not just a convenience. He's a convenience and it's a luxury. So that's why. So I'll talk more about both of those players, where they could fit in with the Jaguars. And then what I'll do after that is explain why in a perfect world, the Jaguars would have been able to get both of them. But in the world that we live in, they won't because they made a deal already for Calvin Ridley. So we'll make sure that we go over that, and we'll make sure that we do it in just a second here, starting in segment 2 on Locked On Jaguars. First, I got to let you guys know about FanDuel. That's right, man. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. I hope y'all picked the East last night in the All-Star game in the NBA because the lineup said one thing, but that's the thing. You got a better deal if you took the East, and they absolutely won a game where people played no defense. But right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You could have done that last night had you bet on FanDuel. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, running it down here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. I got to let you know also that Locked On has launched the first ever, when I say the first ever, I mean it, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available in the Fire TV channels app. All right, so let's get right down to it. What do I like about Christian Haynes? Something told me during the season, Christian Haynes from from UConn. He's a little bit under 6'3", over 310 pounds, played right guard, but also could double up as a center. I wondered that during the season. So let me first tell you why I really started paying attention to him, because as I started at some point before Christmas, I started going through these draft prospects, right? And not just the obvious. I took obvious ones. I took a little bit of a deeper dive. And when I got to the offensive lineman, especially the interior offensive lineman, I saw Christian Haynes and I saw his measurables and I said, not bulky. And so this is where I hope Trent kind of curves off a little bit from, and you saw it a little bit last year when he took Yasir Abdullah in the 5th round. But this is a little different because this is a higher pick. I was saying, I hope he curves that a little bit and realizes, and looks at a guy like Jason Kelsey and says, well, that guy doesn't fit either, but we would have loved to have him. That's, the old soon-to-be Hall of Famer, first ballot type Hall of Famer that played for Doug Peterson in Philadelphia. And I realized that guys from UConn have had a lot of success, right, in the NFL when it comes to offensive line play. Look no further than in Dallas. They got a real good one over there. So there's a lot of really, really good players. I don't think he's in Dallas. That's the guy from Tulsa. But there have been a lot of guys from places like UConn and Tulsa that have played really, really good football. I've been paying attention since UConn, since Randy Edsel was the coach. So the thing that attracted me to him was, when I watched the film, is how he moved and turned, how he was able to get up, get leverage, and turn. And I watched some tape from when they played bigger schools, and he could have very well been on the other side of the ball and been one of the best players on the field. And I wondered out loud. I remember Damian Parson answered it. I think Jordan DeLugo answered it, where I said, can Christian Haynes play center? And guys respond. So Christian Haynes eventually got invited to Mobile. Shout out to the Senior Bowl and Jim Nagy, and immediately established his presence on day one. Matter of fact, had the kid from, I think, Jonathan Jefferson, or the Jefferson kid from LSU, pissed him off. The dude started fighting him after a play, and he says, if you're scared, go to church. That's what Christian Haynes said. He didn't swing back. He just told him, if you're scared, go to church. And immediately he went, because now he's trolling, and it went up on my radar. What actually also attracted to me him was something that the Jaguars value, is scheme versatility and positional versatility on the offensive line. Haynes moved over to center, and guess what? Started dominating there too, right? So I'm thinking like, whoa. Now I want him to be a little quiet, because now I see a guy I thought was a 3rd or 4th round pick that is knocking on the door being a late 1st round pick, 2nd round pick. At center, he reminds me of Rodney Hudson. That's how he's built. I don't know if his arms are as long as Hudson's or whatever, but Rodney Hudson is going to be a Hall of Famer as well. The best 2 centers over the last 15 years in the NFL has probably been Rodney Hudson and Jason Kelsey, and they're both guys that you would think are undersized. So I'm sitting there looking like, I don't want them to draft him because he is similar to them. I want them to draft him because, in spite of his lack of traits and measurables based on the bulky scale, he's just like them in my opinion. I love Christian Haynes, and he's shown that he is way, way higher, should be way higher on the board than a lot of people. You just have to hope one of those playoff teams just don't snatch him up at the end of the 1st round. He might be too much of a luxury for a bad team at the top of the 2nd round, because they have so many needs. Like Carolina got to find a receiver from somewhere, and they need 2. So even if they get one of free agency, they'll probably need another one. But a team that's not starved, a team like Pittsburgh scares me, because, hey, man, we ain't starved. They're a playoff team. We ain't starved. They need a quarterback, but you ain't going to find them where they picking. And they might go, you know what? we keep having all of these great centers over the years, whether it's Damani Dawson, Mike Webster, then Damani Dawson, and then eventually Pouncey. It's like Pittsburgh is the center. They're the centers where Green Bay are the quarterbacks. It's like they've always had one. You can name like 3 Hall of Famers in your lifetime. They always had. So why not get another one? And he's short just like those guys were. So I'm scared that some team is going to find him. Let's get to Dwayne Carter. I'm not talking about Lil Wayne. That's Lil Wayne's name, who everybody wants to be a part of the Super Bowl festivities next year. I'm talking about Dwayne Carter, this human wrecking ball up at Duke at 6'3", right around 6'3"-ish. I would like to see where he's measured, maybe 310, 315. I noticed on tape, I looked because I was actually watching other people, but then I know Mike Elko is this dude that by trade, the head coach at Duke, who's now the head coach at Texas A&M, is a defensive line guru, right? And I'm saying, okay, so let me follow the coaching. And I noticed that all of these guys from Duke were getting all of this love in the transfer portal. And the Duke players, the Duke defensive line was very good last year against FSU. So I went back and I started watching, and I'm like, damn, this dude can play. And I started to go through and find him on the list. He was considered a day 3 pick. I didn't see day 3 on tape. So once again, I kind of put it out there. Damn, Dwayne Carter. And just like I thought, some of my friends in the industry going, you're talking about D tackle at Duke. And it's like, we know. I'm not telling you I'm the one that introduced it, but to get that affirmation and confirmation from people that you respect, they go, you're talking about the guy from Duke, right? Yeah, that's who I'm talking about. He goes to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, and he does the same thing. He starts wiping people out. But he surprised me with something. He's not just a space eater. He's not just a dude that can play the run. The dude is explosive and can actually create pressure up the middle. How important is it for these guys to be able to create pressure up the middle without having people blitzing up the 8 gap and sending extra folks? And having the ability to give up a big play because you're trying to create something. You need guys that can create something without doing that. And he fits. So when we're talking about needs here for Jacksonville, and this is what I keep telling people about not reaching in the first round for a need, I would take those 2 guys or one of those 2 guys in the second round and consider them somebody that can help this team right away at that price for the next 4 years. I think they're going to play. I think they're going to play early. Dwayne Carter, in my opinion, is better than Keanu Benton, who they consider a future star up in Pittsburgh. I think he's a better player. I really, really do. Keanu Benton is going to be in Pittsburgh for a long time as their base defense nose tackle. The difference between the two is Carter can stay in and actually rush the passer from the middle and give you all of the things Benton can give you in the run game. So that's the good news. The good news is hopefully there'll be good players who can help the Jaguars in the second round, which is my second and third round, which is my favorite part of the draft. Here's the bad news. The bad news is the Jaguars would normally have a crack at both of them. They won't now for a good reason. They traded for Calvin Ridley in the trade deadline of 2022. It's a conditional trade that a lot of people are getting confused. I will iron out the difference in what people are out there reporting based on what I think I know about this situation. I'll tell you why, and then I'll tell you how the Jaguars could possibly still end up with both of those players if they, quote unquote, no pun intended, play their cards right. And I'll tell you why in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. But right now, I got to let you know about today's sponsor, which is Game Time, man. I love it when it says Game Time because that means it's go time, right? It's go time for you to go buy you some tickets. But if you waited too long or if your check had to clear, whatever your reason, don't feel bad about it. And people won't give you that, oh, your lack of planning is not my responsibility. It is by all means the responsibility of Game Time to help you when you've been procrastinating, because if you know they're there for you, there ain't no rush, because Game Time can get you tickets to any event, sporting event, play, concert, whatever it is. They got it because they specialize in last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, views from all seats in the venue, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. Even if the event has already started, Game Time can help you where no one else will. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On, LOCKEDON, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Third, final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. All right, we're going to talk about the Calvin Ridley deal and explain it, but I had to put it in context. I wasn't going to do a whole show on a deal that is something that we've talked about here locally for maybe 18 months, a year and a half. There's a lot of confusion out there. Some people think that the Jaguars automatically have to give up a second-round pick as a part of their compensation when it comes to the trade for Calvin Ridley. We have never understood that to be an automatic here. And unless we're interpreting things wrong here in Jacksonville, it's not that cut and dry. If it was that cut and dry, then it would have just happened, right? There were benchmarks that Calvin had to reach in order for the pick to be a third-round pick. He reached them all. It was like 75, pay 70% of the snaps, get X amount of catches for X amount of yards. That's done. He did that. So it's a third-round pick to go along with the additional compensation that was already received. It's a second-round pick. This is what it says. It's a second-round pick if the Jaguars extend Calvin Ridley. So we have to act like we're a part of a hearing at the Supreme Court and we're a politician and go, what do you mean about what do you mean by extension? That's the big question. Is him re-signing here after being out in free agency or having the opportunity to go to free agent consider an extension? Or is an extension the franchise tag where he doesn't get the free agency, or a contract that didn't already happen where he's extended and that becomes a second-round pick? We're of the belief that the Jaguars won't tag him, that the tag will be for Josh Allen. I'm also of the belief that the Jaguars wouldn't be tagging him if they had more than one tag, and that he'll be able to get out into free agency until the start of the new league year. So folks will go like, well, why would he wait on the Jaguars? Why would he wait on the new league year? If he wants to be here, whether it's written or unwritten or said or unsaid or wink, wink, if he wants to be here and he knows the Jags will pay him, yeah, I'll wait. I'll sign, but I'll wait until after that so we don't have to give up a second-round pick. We'll just give him a third-round pick if this is where he wants to be. If this is not where he wants to be, definitely if he wants to follow the money, because Calvin Ridley, even though he's 29 years old, is still playing on his rookie contract, just played on a fifth-year option. So if he wants to say, show me the money, he has the right to do that. And the Jaguars have a right to let him do that. And they also have the right to let his agent know, at least give us a shot to match whatever. All right. And maybe he doesn't want to move around. We are taking out of the factor of what does the player want. The one thing I know he wants is money. All right. And I know the Jaguars are willing to give it to him. A lot of people I respect are saying, just give up the second. I don't care. I don't worry about it. And now I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. Because regardless of what you think, it's a minimum of a third-round pick. One of the two picks I wish they had, but not at I'm glad they took a look-see on Calvin Ridley, got the 1 year of production, and allowed them to determine whether or not they want to keep him up. That's a choice that they paid for. I think they ought to exercise that choice. But let me tell you what goes into that choice. The difference between a third-round pick. So consider this. They're already going to give up a third-rounder, right? What's the difference between that and a second-rounder? When you consider they also have to pay him. And that's the key. They also have to pay him, because many teams are reluctant to trade for players that have the tag. And I'm going to now stay with me now, because I'm going to explain it to you. When a team tags a guy, like when the Jaguars tag Josh Allen, you don't think Josh Allen is worth the first-round pick? What if you're picking 28th? What if you're like Buffalo is picking 28th or Arizona is picking 27th? You know why people just don't say, the hell with that first-round pick. I'm going to sign him. I see what he is. He's an all-pro. Do you know why they don't do that? Do you know why people expect T. Higgins, who's going to be tagged as a first-rounder? Well, do you know why Kansas City might not go after T. Higgins? Because teams hate giving up high picks And I said and, not or, giving up high picks and having to pay the guy that you gave up the high pick for. They hate it. Teams, absolutely. That's why there's very little, you often don't even hear about teams doing that. And then some people will say, well, teams don't like doing it because the other team has 7 days to match and it holds up the money. Ain't nobody worrying about those 7 days, man, and that cap space. And you can look at that team's situation, the other team that has the player under the tag, and you can design a contract that you know that they'll have a hard time matching by front loading it and making the money, a lot of the money hit the salary cap in the first year. But that's not why teams don't do it. Teams hate giving up compensation and paying for people. Unless it's somebody like Devontae Adams or Aaron Rodgers, because you're talking about a Hall of Fame level player. And you think you're close, right? That's why teams do that. But listen, it's not about, well, who will the Jags get at 48 as opposed to who they can get at 81 or 80, which is when they pick. The difference between the second and third rounder is what I'm looking at. So what's the difference? What does it cost if we sign him this day versus that day, right? The difference between the two is based on the trade scale, the NFL value scale, the second round pick the Jaguars have is worth 420 points. The third round pick, and I'm only doing this because somebody told me this is exactly what they do. The third round pick, now consider this, the third round is already gone. It's not yours. It belongs to the Falcons at a minimum. The difference between those two picks is 235 points. The third round pick has a value of 195 points. The second round pick has a value of 420 points. The difference is 235 points, if my math is correct. 235 points is exactly what the 71st pick in the draft is worth. So here's the 71st pick in the draft is like the second or the third pick in the third round. That's what it worth. So let's just say if you were Atlanta and you're sitting there and you say the difference between, well, if you're Jacksonville, the difference between signing Calvin Ridley, the difference between signing him before the trade deadline or before the new league year is whoever the 71st pick is in this year's draft on our board. If I don't, I get to keep the equivalent of that and just give up a third rounder if I wait. So I looked on PFF's big board, and I know it's not exact because it's not the boards that the teams will use, but I'm going to give you about 7 or 8 names this year that are in that area of what they're talking about. Now, this doesn't mean that these are guys the Jaguars will be able to take in the third round. Remember, the third round pick's gone. But it is the equivalent of what it costs if you take him a day before, if you sign Calvin Ridley the day before or the day after the league year. All right, one player I'm interested in, Johnny Wilson. I'm a Florida State fan. I don't want Johnny Wilson on my team in the NFL. Even though I like him as a player and I appreciate it, I think that there's a difference between liking a guy. It's like liking Tyler Hansborough at UNC. Yeah, but I don't want him on my team in the NFL. What a guy did in college and what he's capable of, Jordan Travis loving to death, don't want the Jaguars to take him to be a quarterback in the NFL. And college fandom gets run amok sometimes. The difference is this. Here's Xavier Leggett, Jamari Thrash, the edge I really love at Kansas, Booker. All right. Malachi Corley, Braden Fiske. That's what the 235 points, according to PFF's big board, means. If you sign him a day before, the value of those guys is the difference, and you got to pay him. So now you understand that there is a difference because those guys are expected to be able to help somebody's team. Now, granted, those guys are not the players that the Jaguars would be getting because we're not talking about that. We're talking about what is the value of the difference between signing a player a day before the league year and a day after the league year. And that's the difference. And that's why to the Jaguars, it might be worth the risk to allow some team to outbid them and overpay them because they'll keep the value of what one of those players is. So I hope that helps you guys understand it a little bit more, that there's a lot of value placed on guys like that. And I know everybody's going to say, well, man, it depends on how good Trent Baalke can pick. You're right. So here's what I'll do. I'll go back again and I'll look at guys that were chosen in that area, in that 71-ish type area, just from a year ago. As I do this right now, I'm going to round 3, the top of round 3 up in that area. You see guys like Tyler Steen, Sidney Brown, who plays, of course, Hendon Hooker doesn't matter. Nathaniel Dell by the Texans was chosen right there in that same area. Garrett Williams. You see where I'm coming from? Tucker Kraft, Byron Young, Josh Downs, Tajay Spears, the running back, who's going to be running back 1 over in Tennessee in our own division. Tank Bigsby was chosen in the 3rd round. I know y'all don't want to hear that. But yeah, so this is the thing that you can get. This is the difference. This is the value of the difference with signing him day 2, before the deadline or after. Ask yourself if it's worth it or not, and you'll have to go from there. But plenty of help can be had on day 2. The Jaguars, as we see it, here's what they can do. Y'all want to know how they can get an extra day 2 pick? Move down from 17 and post yourself up right there at 27, 28, and get maybe an extra 2nd or an extra 3rd. They moved down twice last year and still got Anton Harrison, so the world didn't end by them moving down. The world ain't going to end either, but I still appreciate y'all coming here to watch Locked On Jaguars on tomorrow. Make sure you do it, because we always take the time out to give you the best, and hopefully you give me yours too. Until tomorrow, take care.